everyone, and welcome to another edition of Eye on the Enemy, powered by the Eagles Pin Pull Network. I'm your host, John Stolnis. I'm a writer for Bleeding Green Nation. You can follow me on X at John Stolnis. This week, we're previewing Eagles Buccaneers, a rematch from last year's wild card round loss, in which the Tampa Bay Bucs mercifully put us out of our misery following a brutal end to the 2023 season. And the Eagles will try to get their, I don't know, is it revenge? It doesn't really feel like a revenge-y type game because I think they almost did us a favor last year. But the Eagles are going to go back down to Tampa and they're going to try and get a win over a Tampa Bay Buccaneers team that's off to a decent start this year. Although I still don't think the Buccaneers are a Super Bowl contender in any way. But we're going to talk in just a couple of minutes to really a great writer for Pewter Report and also an outstanding podcast host and producer, Matt Matera. He writes for Pewter Report, really good site if you want to learn everything about the Buccaneers, so make sure you check that place out. We're going to talk to him in just a couple of minutes, breaking down X's and O's and a very full injury report. All that coming up here on this edition of Eye on the Enemy. And joining me to help break down this matchup between the Eagles and the Bucs on Sunday, Matt Matera, reporter and podcast producer for Pewter Report. It's an outstanding Buccaneers website you're going to want to check out. You can follow him on the X machine at Matty4_Matera. Matt, welcome to Eye on the Enemy. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on. And how are you doing?
Doing fine. This is certainly an interesting game coming up here between two teams that met not too long ago. And I know sometimes, as Eagles fans, when we get a rematch against a team that knocked us out in the playoffs, we have we harbor a little ill will towards that team. Anytime you get knocked out by somebody, it's like, oh, we got to. It's funny. Eagles fans have no animosity or regret about the playoff game last year that the Buccaneers won 32-9. We kind of looked at it as kind of a mercy killing, given the way that the end of the season went for the Eagles. We just knew there was no chance we were going into Tampa and beating you guys. And I think if you've asked us that same thing at midseason, we would have guaranteed a victory over Baker Mayfield and the Buccaneers. But by the time that game rolled around, it was clear the Bucs were a far superior team than whatever the heck it was the Eagles were doing. So I just want to thank you and the rest of the Buccaneers literally for the shovel over the head of the Eagles 2024 season.
Well, that was an important win for the Bucs as well, with Todd Bowles and his regime since becoming the head coach of the Buccaneers. So I'm sure all of Tampa Bay is happy about it. And it's very interesting that you mentioned that too, because 2 weeks ago, the Bucs went into Detroit and played the Lions, who were a team that they played twice last year, and ended the Bucs season in Detroit. And, they got a little bit of revenge beating them in week 2, but that was a little bit of the discussion this week, with kind of understanding that Philly is now going to the place where they got knocked out last year, may wanting some revenge. But I think you put it best. It seemed like the Eagles and their fans were more mad at themselves and the coaching staff than necessarily anything that Tampa did.
Yeah, there was no pointing the finger at the Buccaneers or animosity, because we knew that that it was us. We knew that it was our coaching staff. We knew that it was everything that went wrong. And hey, make no mistake, and this is kind of what I want to get into here this week too. I think the Buccaneers are a better team than we thought they were at the end of last season. Certainly, they're a better team than I thought they were going to be going into the season. I ripped the Baker Mayfield decision to start him because I just had no confidence that Mayfield would be a serviceable NFL quarterback. But here we are a year later, and he looks like the guy that I think Cleveland thought they were going to get when they drafted him. He has a 110.7 passer rating through the first 3 weeks of the NFL season, and even the eye test just tells you that he's in command of that offense. I watched the game against the Commanders in week 1, and they look just really solid. I mean, it just looks like a well-built offense right now. I know they're 2-1. They won the first 2 games. You mentioned the Lions game, a big win in Detroit, but then kind of a confusing stumble last week against the Denver Broncos, really in a game where they weren't very competitive offensively, falling 26-7. What happened last week as compared to the first 2 weeks?
Yeah, it was as shocking as a loss that you could see in the NFL. The Bucs were a huge favorite, and they planned on going 3-0 with the win over a winless Denver Broncos at the time. But that's the NFL for you. The game plan, especially on the defensive side, was really surprising and really questionable as well. Todd Bowles played a lot of cover 4 defense, so he had his players drop back in the secondary specifically and kind of let Bo Nix dink and dunk down the field, which when you're going up against a rookie quarterback, you want to put pressure in his face. You want him making quick decisions. And I think part of the problem was that first drive, that was Tampa Bay's plan. And as we know, Todd Bowles loves to blitz. He loves to bring pressure in different ways. And they challenged Bo Nix to make some throws down the field. And he did. He hit 2 nice passes about 20 yards down the field that, got Denver down into the red zone. And for whatever reason, I think the Bucs kind of got scared and were afraid to allow the deep ball versus saying, all right, good job on that first drive. Let's see you do it again. So when they weren't able to get pressure, which has been kind of a big storyline for the Bucs so far this year, they weren't able to get pressure. They were missing their 2 defensive tackles up front. Bo Nix had all day to throw and just kind of sliced them apart with his mobility, which was a little bit more of a surprise. I mean, he's no Jaden Daniels by any means. And just the fact that he could continuously move the ball without pressure. The Bucs immediately went down 14-0 because Baker Mayfield threw an interception that gave the Broncos the ball on the 10-yard line. And with Denver knowing that Tampa Bay had to keep throwing the football, they couldn't get a run game going. Things fell apart really quickly, and the Bucs just didn't really have an answer for Sean Payton, who now is 7-0 against Todd Bowles in the regular season. The Bucs got that big win in 2020 in the playoffs when they eventually won the Super Bowl against the Saints. But Sean Payton just had the number of Todd Bowles, and it showed up on Sunday.
Yeah, and the NFL is weird. You're right. It's a week-to-week league. Rarely does one week affect the next week. There's very little momentum in the NFL right now. Every once in a while, you see a team get on a roll, but generally speaking, you're right. It's kind of these little surprises happen, and sometimes they're a pleasant surprise, and sometimes they're not a pleasant surprise. So let's talk about. I want to stick with the Buccaneers offense right now against an Eagles defense that really, as an Eagles fan through 3 weeks, I don't really know what we've got. They looked decent enough against Jordan Love in week 1 in Brazil, but there were certainly some warts in that game as well, especially against the run. Week 2 against the Falcons, they got gashed by the run again and then gave up that back-breaking, critical, last-minute touchdown. And then last week against the Saints, who had scored over 40 points in each of their first 2 games, the defense, and especially the defensive line, Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, the guys in the middle, were wrecking shops, especially against the run. Vic Fangio played some more 5-down linemen to try and really focus on stopping the run and dared Derek Carr to beat them in the air. And then the secondary kind of did its job. It was just a remarkable performance, one of the best defensive performances we've seen over the last few years during the Nick Sirianni era. So as a Buccaneers offense, what is your assessment? What would their assessment be of this Eagles defense and how you attack it right now? Because I think none of us know exactly what the strengths and weaknesses of this defense is right now.
Yeah, for sure. And it's funny. It is a week-to-week league, kind of like what we are talking about, because looking at the Eagles defense and specifically going up against the Bucs offense, the thing that Tampa Bay does not have going for them right now is that they have struggled running the football. They have been dead last in yards per attempt and rushing yards over the last 2 years. Now, they brought in a rookie, Bucky Irving, who's been bringing the juice for that group, but it's been a little too late for Tampa Bay with running the football. They have a rookie, their first-round pick, Graham Barton, starting at center. Cody Mauch, their right guard, is a second-year player from North Dakota, and they brought in a free agent, Ben Bredesen, who previously played for the Giants, so he's a little familiar playing against the Eagles. But that's the weakness of the interior offensive line for the Bucs. So Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis, I mean, Carter was a monster that last game. If the Eagles are going to generate pressure against Tampa Bay, it's going to be right up the middle, and I'm a little worried for the Bucs in that aspect of it. So I don't think the Bucs are necessarily going to run the ball that well against the Eagles unless they give Bucky Irving more snaps. So their starting running back is Rachaad White. He outsnapped Bucky 42-18, but that last game against Denver, Bucky Irving had 70 rushing yards. Rachaad White had 17 rushing yards, and he's outrushed Rachaad White every single game. So if the Bucs are going to find success, they have to stick to their gap run blocking versus their zone run blocking, because they've just been abysmal in their zone blocking. So they're going to beat the Eagles. If they do, it's going to be through the passing game, because they got a ton of weapons between Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. Rachaad White, even though not great as a runner, is fantastic in the screen game and the passing game. So I think what the Bucs will try to do is they're going to get Mike Evans in motion a lot more, and Chris Godwin has been playing in the slot. He didn't play there last year. They moved him back to the slot this season, and he looks like the vintage Chris Godwin that was top 5 in receiving yards in 2019 and great in 2020. So it's going to be a lot of peppering Chris Godwin, and they're going to get Mike Evans some favorable matchups, because the last 2 weeks he hasn't gotten a lot of targets. And as you know, if you watch that Cowboys game on Thursday against the Giants, CeeDee Lamb wasn't happy that he wasn't getting the football. So what did? They just gave him the football nonstop, and that's going to be the case with Mike Evans. And I know the Eagles don't really travel their corners on each side of the field. They just stay on one side. So they're going to look for the most advantageous matchup for Mike Evans. And I think he's going to be involved a ton, whether it's man, whether it's zone. Mike's been getting a lot more one-on-one opportunities this year, and that's music to his ears. So it'll probably be more through the passing game that they get it done against the Eagles, especially because the Eagles don't blitz that much, which should be helpful for the Bucs, who have had trouble protecting Baker Mayfield. He got sacked 7 times last Sunday.
Are they going to be 3 wide most of the time? Probably.
Yeah. Their base offense really is 11 personnel with Liam Cohen, their offensive coordinator, who came from Kentucky and previously coached at the Rams as well. Yeah, they'll go Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and Jalen McMillan, their rookie wide receiver from Washington. They also play like right around the same amount of snaps. So McMillan hasn't done too much this year, but he does play pretty much the same time as Mike and Chris.
And I'll tell you right now, at this stage of their careers, I'm not so sure there's a big gap between Darius Slay and Quinyon Mitchell. Now, I mean, I think you want to match up your star veteran wide receiver Mike Evans against the rookie and take your chances there against the former Pro Bowler. But I don't know. I mean, Quinyon Mitchell has, aside from that last drive against the Falcons, acquitted himself really, really well through his first three games in the NFL. So even if the Eagles traveled their cornerbacks, I don't know for sure that it would necessarily be Darius Slay following Mike Evans around the field. It probably would, but I don't think they're going to do that. I think they feel confident matching up either guy, and I think that's going to be one of the key matchups in this game. Also, in the slot, of course, how are they going to cover Chris Godwin in the slot? That's the nightmare matchup that the Eagles are going to have to deal with. But, Avonte Maddox has got a lot of experience back there, but certainly has lost a step over the last couple of years with all the injuries. So I think that's a big area. Certainly Chris Godwin is going to be a name we hear called a lot on Sunday afternoon. You did mention the offensive line and the 7 sacks that they allowed to Baker Mayfield. This Eagles defense, especially the edge rushers, have really struggled to get to the quarterback. Bryce Huff has been a big story in Philadelphia through the first 3 weeks, still has not registered a statistic so far this season, and his snap totals went way down in week 3. Maybe not coincidentally, the defensive line as a whole played a lot better. Now, I know they want to keep working him in, but I think we're starting to see he may just be a pass rushing specialist. Either way, the edge rushers have not gotten the job done. Where is the Bucs offensive line the weakest? Is it in the interior? Or is it on the outsides? And what is Tristan Wirfs' injury situation coming into this week? Because I know he was on the injury report.
Yeah, Tristan Wirfs is fine. He just got a little banged up last game, but really the biggest thing was right tackle. Their starting right tackle, Luke Gedeke, he's missed the last 2 games with a concussion, so they had their backup Justin School in, and he was the one blocking Aiden Hutchinson 2 weeks ago when Aiden Hutchinson had 4 sacks in the first half and had 3 in the first quarter alone. But it looks like he's going to be ready for this game. There's no question the weakness is the interior of the offensive line with Barton, who's getting better week by week, but it is a rookie playing center. And as we know, center in the NFL, you're asked to do a lot of things, point out a lot of coverages. Cody Mauch, their second-year right guard, still kind of finding his way in the league. He's a better run blocker than he is a pass blocker at this point. And that's saying a lot given that the running game's been terrible for the Buccaneers this season. So if the Eagles are really going to get to Baker Mayfield, who sometimes can hold on to the football a little bit too long, he's been better with it this year despite getting sacked so much. It is going to be through that A and B gap with Barton and Cody Mauch and Ben Bredesen on that other side. So the tackles, Tristan Wirfs, in my opinion, is one of the best offensive tackles in the league. Lane Johnson certainly is up there. Penei Sewell of the Lions is up there as well, but I'll take Tristan Wirfs with really any offensive tackle in the league. And Luke Gedeke, certainly not a household name, but he's a guy that has really held his own since he started at right tackle last season. He's going into his 3rd year now. So if he's healthy, that's a huge boost for the Bucs. But like I said, the interior is where the Eagles are really going to win that matchup.
So I guess we're talking about looking for another big game from Jalen Carter here on Sunday. If they're going to get any kind of pressure, it's going to be coming from that area of the defensive line, which is good news because that is supposedly a strength of the Eagles defense. Let's flip things around. And the worry from Eagles fans right now is certainly the catastrophic run of injuries we're seeing on the wide receiver position, which was already a top-heavy position group. You have the 2 stars in A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, and then after that, it's kind of a rough scene. You know, you have Jahan Dotson, who they traded a 3rd-round pick for in the offseason. He's played a lot of snaps and hasn't produced very much. Britton Covey was also injured in the game. He had proven to be a high target guy in the slot, really, in terms of receptions, turned into their number 3 receiver so far this year. Don't know if that was going to hold up the whole year or not, but they really liked throwing to him for some reason. And then you've got guys like Paris Campbell and Johnny Wilson is a rookie that they drafted. And then there's John Ross, who they signed off the practice squad, was with the team earlier in the season, and he might get some playing time. This is not a group of wide receivers that instills a lot of fear into a defense. And so we're not exactly sure how this team is going to throw the football here on Sunday. So if you're looking at the Eagles and how they match up, you know, they've got Saquon. They've been running the ball really well. Jalen Hurts, certainly a dual threat, and Dallas Goedert finally had his breakout game last Sunday. What do you do? How do you allocate your resources? And I know Todd Bowles loves to blitz. How heavy on the blitz do they go this Sunday against a very different-looking Eagles offense?
Yeah, I think this game is truly a war of attrition because you mentioned all the injuries with the Eagles on the offensive side. Not that the Eagles are going to feel bad for the Bucs, but the Bucs have a lot of injuries as well. Like they've been missing their 1st-round pick from last year, defensive tackle Kalijah Cansey. He's missed all of this season so far. Vita Vea got injured against the Lions and missed last week's game with a knee injury. He's going to try to play this week, but right now he's a game-time decision. And they've been out with their all-pro free safety, Antoine Winfield Jr., since week 1. He's one of the best players in the league, let alone the best player on the Bucs defense. So this matchup is so odd with the fact that A.J. Brown is out and it's looking like Smith is out as well. The Bucs have 2 pretty good corners. I'm very high on Zion McCollum, who's in his 3rd year. He played at Sam Houston State. It took a little while to crack the starting lineup, but he's been lights out since he's gotten that starting opportunity. And Jamel Dean is a little hit or miss, but if your starting wide receivers aren't playing for the Eagles, I think it's really going to be a very, very run-heavy system. And that, you know, that's not surprising, obviously, when you have Saquon. And the Bucs have gone up against the Eagles. We talked about how they played twice last year, but the Bucs have always prided themselves on being able to stop the run. With that said, when you're missing your top 2 starting defensive tackles, it's still really difficult to do that. It's kind of been defensive tackle by committee. They have a backup in Greg Gaines that was actually roommates and teammates with Vita Vea going back to their college football playing days in Washington. He's been asked to play a lot more snaps, which has kind of worn him down a little bit. They have a couple other defensive tackles like Mike Green and CJ Brewer that are practice squad guys that have been elevated. So they've done a solid job at stopping the run, but at the same time, Washington doesn't have the best running game outside of Jaden Daniels. And the Lions in week 2 just did not really run it as much with David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs as you thought they would have, considered who the Bucs were missing. So they haven't truly been tested by a great running back just yet. So they're going to have to be disciplined within their lanes, rushing as well with Jalen Hurts. We know how he can get out of the pocket, but the Bucs haven't been getting to the quarterback. They're great with pressures. They were great against the Lions, but they had very little QB hits in week 3 against Denver. So if they can get pressure on Jalen Hurts, even if you're forcing him to throw the football away, obviously that's a win for the Bucs. The biggest matchup, you mentioned Dallas Goedert. So the Bucs have this interesting platoon going on at inside linebacker. They obviously have Levante David, who's one of the best linebackers, over the last decade. But their other starting inside linebacker spot, Devin White, is in Philadelphia, so he's not there anymore. They're switching on and off between KJ Britt and Servassier Dennis. I don't expect the Eagles fans to know who these guys are, but Servassier Dennis is a little bit more of the pass coverage linebacker. So he's going to be guarding Dallas Goedert a lot in this game, and I think whoever can get the better of that matchup may end up kind of tilting the pendulum in the direction of their respective teams. So Servassier Dennis versus Dallas Goedert, I think, is one of the biggest matchups because the wide receivers aren't playing. And I would think the Eagles will try to attack more, even though they are great to the outside, up the middle, whether the Bucs are struggling on the offensive side or the defensive side. That's where you're really going to kind of beat the core of Tampa Bay, especially if Vita Vea doesn't play in this game, because he makes all the difference in the world for that defense.
And we saw the Eagles' offensive line last week, even when Lane Johnson went out. Tyler Steen stepped in for Mekhi Becton when he hurt his finger. They really just continue to plug holes. It's a tremendously coached unit. Obviously, Jeff Stoutland is a as a revered hero as the offensive line coach in Philadelphia for how he's just created careers for people like Jordan Mailata and seemingly Becton and just turned some of the Cam Jurgens is really the Eagles haven't missed a beat since Jason Kelce left to a degree. I mean, Kelce is a one-of-one player, but Jurgens has been doing a fine job there on the offensive line so far. And I will say the thing that is most encouraging about the Eagles offense right now has been Jalen Hurts' running so far this year. Last year, he just looked slow. He looked a step slow. Yeah. He didn't have that burst to the outside. He had no ability to run away from people. He didn't seem at all interested in lowering his shoulder for an extra yard or two at times. And we wanted him to find a middle ground between being a bulldozer out there and then just like dropping into the fetal position whenever somebody came near him. And so I hope that we're finding that here in 2024. But I did want to throw these numbers out at you because certainly the blitz is going to be a big part of what the Buccaneers do on Sunday. It certainly was in the playoff game last year. They blitzed Hurts on 27 of his 39 dropbacks. Last year against the blitz, in 268 dropbacks, had a completion percentage of 63.1%, 9 touchdowns and 8 interceptions, sacked 17 times, 6.3% of his dropbacks. So far this year, 38 dropbacks, again, a smaller sample size, but the completion percentage is 72.7% against the blitz. It's up 9 points. Just 1 touchdown, but only 1 interception so far against the blitz and sacked just twice so far in 38 dropbacks. It's a 5.3 percentage, so 1 percentage lower than last year. I think we're seeing that there's an improvement here, and it'll probably be a work in progress during the course of the season, but his passer rating of 90.3 against the blitz right now is 20th in the NFL, and the 72.7 completion percentage is 7th among qualified quarterbacks. So certainly better. I don't think we're talking about a guy who's a blitz killer anymore right now, but certainly the Eagles have learned something from last year. So I wonder if you think that means we're going to see some more zero coverage blitzes, or if you don't think the Bucs need to do that, given who the Eagles have on the outside.
Yeah, it's a dicey situation because the Bucs, even going back to last year, have really struggled with getting home with just, a 4-man pass rush or even a 5-man pass rush. And that's carried over into this year, despite the fact that they're very high on Yaya Diaby, an outside linebacker who they drafted out of Louisville a season ago. The Bucs haven't had a sack since week 1. So they are starving to get after the quarterback. Now, you make a great point. If the wide receivers, the starting ones for the Eagles, aren't in there, well, it gives you a little more leniency in what you want to do with your coverage. Now, Bowles has typically kind of been afraid to allow the big play, but then that's why you also saw them get sliced up by the quarterback for the Broncos last week, Bo Nix. So going into this matchup, my fear for the Bucs is that, well, they do have to send pressure because they're just not getting pressure with the guys up front. And again, that could change if Vita Vea plays. But if they're not getting that pressure, Bowles likes to bring it from different ways. It's not just your traditional, we're going to send Levante David, the linebacker. They love blitzing safeties. They have a defensive back, a rookie out of Georgia, Tyke Smith, who's very versatile and can blitz. Jordan Whitehead, who was drafted by the Bucs and went to the Jets and then came back to the Bucs. He's great in the box as well. So I think you'll see Bowles get creative with this type of blitzing and not just the traditional way of, sending an extra linebacker or whatever it is. He'll try to confuse Jalen Hurts, but they played each other enough. Like, not even just last season. Hurts has seen the Bucs a fair amount in his career that I don't know how much Bowles can really surprise him versus another opponent that they don't see that often. So Bowles is still going to bring his blitzes if they can't get home with the front 4. I don't necessarily know if it'll be a lot of zero coverage. I think it'll be a fair amount of zone. It's just whether the Eagles receivers can kind of find that open space or beat their matchup. I think they can against Dean a little bit and obviously find the pockets in the zone. But most importantly, I think it's just kind of containing Jalen Hurts, not letting him run, because even Jaden Daniels was able to do that against the Bucs, and ultimately when the Bucs score 37 points, they're going to win. Right. But if Hurts can do what Daniels did, the Eagles are going to score a lot more than Washington did.
Well, let's wrap this thing up with a prediction from you here, Matt. How do you think things are going to go down on Sunday?
At your job, do you ever have to deal with a nose roller? How about a snub pulley? Well, if you're installing a new conveyor belt system, dealing with the different components can sound like you're speaking a foreign language. Luckily, you've got a team ready to help. Grainger's technical product specialists are fluent in maintenance, repair, and operations. So whenever you want to talk shop, just reach out. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
It is Ryan here, and I have a question for you. What do you do when you win? Like, are you a fist pumper, a woohooer, a hand clapper, a high fiver? If you want to hone in on those winning moves, check out Chumba Casino. Choose from hundreds of social casino-style games for your chance to redeem serious cash prizes. There are new game releases weekly, plus free daily bonuses. So don't wait. Start having the most fun ever at ChumbaCasino.com.
Sponsored by Chumba Casino. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
I think it's going to be very low scoring. Obviously, the weather is going to not be ideal depending on what's going on with this, hurricane and storm situation in Tampa at the moment. So I think it's going to be fairly run heavy. The Bucs got to get a bad taste out of their mouth, though, the way that they lost to the Broncos the week before. They don't want to get on a losing streak like they did last season. So I'm going to take the Bucs in a very close game, kind of a rock fight type of game. I think it'll be like 17-14, pretty low scoring, but an entertaining game.
Well, and we'll see whether or not the Eagles push a whole lot of players here. I think if anybody's questionable to play in this game on the Eagles side, I think they probably don't with the bye week coming early in the season, get everybody healthy. So that may play into the Bucs' favor. Hey, sometimes you get teams when they're at a weak point. You get a team playing a backup quarterback. You get a team playing without two of the best wide receivers in the NFL, and you got to take advantage of it. So we'll see if the Bucs can handle that business on Sunday. Matt Matera, he's a great reporter, podcast producer for Pewter Report. Would encourage you to check out that website to learn a little bit more about the enemy the Eagles are going to be facing on Sunday. And you can follow him on X at Matty4_Matera. Matt, thanks for coming on Eye on the Enemy. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, anytime. Thanks for having me on.
All right, now here is the latest on the injury news, and this information came out after my conversation with Matt, and it looks like some good news here for the Eagles on a couple of different fronts. First, looking at Tampa, it appears as though Kalijah Kancey and Antoine Winfield Jr. are definitely out for Sunday's game against the Eagles. That's according to Tampa head coach Todd Bowles, and a little bit of a surprise, maybe not so much on this first name, but Lane Johnson back at practice on Friday. I'm recording this before the official injury report comes out for Friday, but the fact he's on the field and practicing seems to indicate that he will be back in the lineup. But then even more surprising, A.J. Brown at practice on Friday, stretching out the hamstring, his first practice since getting hurt. That, at the very least, opens the door for A.J. Brown to return. Devontae Smith, we still haven't seen him out on the field for the Eagles here on Friday, so it is very likely that he will not play on Sunday. But the door now open for A.J. Brown potentially playing on Sunday down in Tampa against the Bucs, and that, of course, changes a lot of what I just talked to Matt about when the Eagles have the ball offensively. It would certainly change the Eagles' game plan a little bit, and you would see you would see that how much of a difference that would make. Now, a lot of people, I'm sure, are going to come on and they're going to say, well, if the Eagles, have a bye week next week, why not just let A.J. Brown not play this week, give him 2 weeks, and then you make sure that he's ready for the 5th game of the season in week 6 after the bye week. But listen, if A.J. Brown can play, if he's ready to play, if the doctors don't think there's a chance he could injure it, make it worse, do something terrible to himself or hurt some other part of his body as he's trying to compensate for the hamstring, then he should play. Every game counts here in the NFL. What if you're battling with the Buccaneers for a wild card spot at the end of the season and you just gave this game away when you didn't have to because you were overly cautious? I understand the other side of that coin. If you push A.J. Brown before he's 100% in order to get him in against the Buccaneers, you potentially lose him for a much longer period of time. I've got to believe that the Eagles trainers, the doctors, and the coaches understand that here in week 4, having a longer view of the season makes more sense. And that A.J. Brown would not be on the field if his hamstring wasn't fully recovered. He's already missed 2 weeks. He's basically had almost 3 weeks to rest his hamstring and get it right. And if it was a minor strain, then this is an appropriate amount of time. So I don't think, just because in our heads we were all thinking, well, they'll probably sit him here on Sunday, let him rest for the bye week, and then we're sure he'll be ready to go. If he's ready to go now, he should go now. If we had no idea exactly how long A.J. Brown was going to be out. He said a couple of weeks. Well, it's been a couple of weeks, but we're just guessing on our end here. So you can't make the assumption that the Eagles are making a mistake here. Maybe we find out at the end of the day they did make a mistake, but we don't know that yet. And if A.J. Brown is on the field, if he says that he can play, A.J. Brown should be on the field because it gives the Eagles a much better chance of knocking off the Tampa Bay Bucs. And I imagine Matt's prediction on the game might change a little bit if A.J. Brown was out there. I think it might change my prediction on the game as well, which I'm going to give you here in just a couple of minutes. But first, let's run down some of the slate that will interest Eagles fans most coming up this weekend. Again, the Eagles are 2-point favorites against Tampa Bay on the road, which is interesting without A.J. Brown. That line was set before A.J. Brown was set to come back. I'm going to revisit that in just a second. You've got the Minnesota Vikings in Green Bay to take on the Packers. The Vikings off to a great start, especially defensively, and the Packers are 3-point favorites in that game. I think I picked the Packers to win that game. Yeah, I think I picked the Packers to win that game. I think Minnesota suffers their first loss this weekend in Lambeau. The Bears, 3-point favorites over the Rams. I know the Rams are beat up, but man, that was a big win over the 49ers. Are we thinking letdown? Are we thinking you got that big comeback win over the 49ers and you go into Chicago and there is a little bit of a letdown there? I could see that. I know there's a lot of people who do not subscribe to the letdown game theory. I would still take the Rams to win this game. I certainly would take them to cover, obviously. I would take the Rams in this game, but it is an interesting line, the Bears 3-point favorites. I mean they like the rookie quarterback. I get it. But the Rams just knocked off the 49ers. I know the 49ers were dealing with some injuries there, but I don't know. That's an interesting line right there. Big NFC South matchup that, of course, Buccaneers fans are going to be keeping an eye on. The Saints against the Falcons. The Falcons looked a little pesky against the Chiefs on Sunday Night Football last week, didn't they? They certainly looked like a decent team, not like the team that the Eagles played through the first 3 quarters on Monday night. They looked like that final drive Falcons team for a good portion of that game, maybe getting their legs under them a little bit. And, of course, the Saints struggled to move the ball, struggled to score against the Eagles defense after doing nothing but score in their first 2 games. So I'm still not sure exactly what both of those teams are, so I guess the Falcons being a 2.5-point favorite on their home field makes a little bit of sense. So the Saints, I guess, seen as a slightly better team than the Falcons, but I'll take the Falcons there. They're my preseason pick to win the South. I'll take the Falcons at home against the Saints. And then as you move down the list, some more 1 o'clock starts here. You've got the Jaguars against the Texans. Texans favored by 6 at home. Doug Peterson might be fighting for his job down in Jacksonville. That was a brutal loss on Monday night against the Bills. Now we move into the late afternoon window, the 4:05 games. The San Francisco 49ers have a chance to get right. They got some bad news. It sounds like Christian McCaffrey is going to be out for at least a couple of months. Remember, it was thought that he might start week 1, and now it looks like he might not start for a good long time. But they're 10.5-point favorites against the Patriots at home. They will have no problem getting back on the winning track after blowing that late lead against the Rams. 2 losses in a row for the 49ers here. That's not going to be 3. The Commanders are in Arizona to take on an Arizona Cardinals team that has a little bit of juice to them. But of course, the Commanders riding high with Jaden Daniels and that incredible victory that they had against the Bengals in Cincinnati on Monday Night Football. It's a short week for Washington. They've got to go out west to take on the Cardinals. I feel like this might be a little bit of a letdown game for Washington as well. So I would take the Cardinals in this game to win. I think the Cardinals win that game. And then you've got the Kansas City Chiefs against the Los Angeles Chargers at 4:25. That's the big national game on Sunday afternoon. The Chargers and the Chiefs, it's a NFC West matchup. The Chiefs are 7-point favorites on the road. I think the Chargers keep it close. I do think the Chiefs win that game. Sunday Night Football, the Bills against the Ravens. What are the Ravens, folks? Do we know? Are they the team that dominated Dallas for 3 quarters and then almost blew the game? What are the Buffalo Bills? Are they the team that absolutely destroyed the Jacksonville Jaguars? There's a lot of offensive talent. Josh Allen versus Lamar Jackson. It should be a great game. I got to give the nod to the Ravens at home. It's a real tough place to play, Baltimore. I think the Bills go in there. That's a good game. I think it's a tight game. I think it's a good loss for whoever loses that game. But I think the Ravens end up on top. And then they're doing 2 Monday Night Football games again this week. I know Vic Fangio was perplexed by this, as am I. Why are we doing 2 Monday Night Football games? We We don't need two of them. I just give me one thing to watch. I don't want to be flipping around between the two different games. And, are you here in Philadelphia? I don't know that there's a whole lot of interest in either of these two games. You got Tennessee in Miami to take on the Dolphins. The Dolphins are 1-point favorites. Who cares? I'll take the Dolphins to win. And then you've got Seattle in Detroit to take on the Lions. We care about this game slightly more because of NFC competition, wild card matchups. The Detroit Lions are a Super Bowl caliber team. They're favored by 3.5 over the Seahawks at home. I would probably take the Lions in that game as well. Which brings us to Eagles against the Buccaneers. Again, I think it's interesting. They're 2-point favorites on the road in Tampa against a team and against a defensive coordinator that Jalen Hurts has had a lot of trouble with over the years. I was all set to pick Tampa in this game with the Eagles wide receivers being decimated, but I don't know now. I think A.J. Brown coming back, and you've got Lane Johnson back at right tackle. I don't know. Mekhi Becton is expected to play. I don't know what to make of this Eagles team. They are a confusing bunch. They've been all things to all people so far this year. They've been frustrating and exciting and maddening and exciting. I'm using a lot of the same words because I don't know what we have yet in these Eagles. But I am going to predict that they go into Tampa and they beat the Buccaneers. On our bleedinggreennation.com picks, we usually have to submit our predictions a little bit early. I'm going to go in and change mine because I picked the Buccaneers to win, thinking A.J. Brown wasn't going to play. If A.J. Brown plays, I think the Eagles win this game, and the Eagles have not won a game by more than one possession going back to the Dolphins game last year. I think this is the week that ends. I think this is the week, and I think it happens on the road in Tampa, that the Eagles go someplace and win a game by more than one possession. I'm going to say it's a 10-point victory. I'm going to say the Eagles win 27-17. That's my prediction for Sunday afternoon's game in Tampa against the Buccaneers. Folks, that's going to do it for this edition of Eye on the Enemy. I would appreciate you checking out my work over at bleedinggreennation.com and all of the podcasts we have for you here at the Pinpool Network. Lots for you to choose from, lots of different styles, lots of different hosts. Make sure you find your favorite ones and just keep plugging them into your earballs. Check the feed every single day for new Eagles content coming your way. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. We'll talk to you next time right here on Eye on the Enemy.